This is the organizational meeting and public hearing of the Committee on Sustainable Development Goals, Innovation and Futures Thinking, joint with the Committees on Public Works, Environment, Natural Resources and Climate Change, and Finance. This meeting is called to order. I would like to beg your indulgence as I arrived late. I actually was here, but I had to attend. There are so many hearings ongoing because session just started. So I passed by the Committee on Public Works. And those of you involved in sustainability, and I see Mr. Robert C. nodding his head, you will be happy that I passed by because we want to be sure that we have the support of the Department of Public Works and Highway. So, minabuti ko nang magpakita doon para alam nila na yung trabaho natin, particularly the agenda for today, is relevant no, to the committee, to the Department of Public Works and Highway. So, and then, I might have to excuse myself, hopefully for not more than 5 minutes at some point, because I also need to show myself in the committee hearing on health. And as many of you who are involved and who have worked with me know, that the objective of this committee is really to ensure that every agency of government realizes that their work is intertwined with other agencies. And there really is no mechanism in government and in the legislatures, aside from in all humility, this Committee on Sustainable Development Goals, Innovation, Futures Thinking that tries to ensure that we are all connected and working together. So that's really my goal for the next 3 years, to really bring in all the stakeholders from different agencies, not just the principal stakeholders as it is normally envisioned, but all the other agencies that need to be aligned to ensure full implementation, well, to ensure, number one, a fruitful discussion and eventually a good implementation of whatever legislative matter is on hand. Before we proceed with the bills that are included here, this is the first hearing of the 19th Congress. So for many of you who are present, and it's just that the ones I can see are Dr. Tony Dance and Dr. Beverly Ho, who have always been in my hearings. Thank you. It's good to see you. This is just like a continuation for us, but I need to officially state that this is a new Congress, and so we have to start all over again, and that is why we have to have this hearing again on the Safe Pathways bill. But for the record, the jurisdiction of this committee, as provided in the rules of the Senate, is as follows. All matters relating to the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the assessment of the country's performance in attaining said developmental goals through policies, strategies, and actions for the development of desirable futures by using a multidisciplinary approach in illuminating possibilities, outlining policy choices, and assessing alternatives. Last August 3, I delivered a privileged speech emphasizing the need for sustainability in our work here in the Senate. So for those of you who follow me on social media, just as a token of support and to encourage my colleagues and for us to walk the talk in our own home, I moved for the banning of PET bottles and sachets. Anything else? I have a long list, pero I'm breaking it to people gently. So PET bottles, sachets, and
Less paper.
yeah, well, not banning. Yeah, we also discuss lessening the use of paper, not banning pa naman paper. So yeah, so the idea really is for each of us to also understand that the responsibility starts with us. When I saw both Dr. Dance and Dr. Ho, I need to let you know that if you're not monitoring the hearing on the Committee on Health, there are discussions on the dengue, which I know are concerns of yours as well. So feel free if you need to monitor what's going on there also. But of course, there will be other hearings. I also see Attorney Goyo Larazabal, a fellow cyclist like me, who will also be providing his input. So anyway, so later on, I need to wait for my colleagues because I need one of their presence here, either online or physically, to for my quorum and to follow procedure so I can adopt the rules of the Senate, the rules of the committee. All right, so let's proceed with the agenda on hand. The bills that we have are Senate Bill 19, Safe Pathways Network Act, authored by this representation. Senate Bill number 331, Bicycle Friendly Communities Act of 2022, authored by Senator Grace Poe. Senate Bill number 393, Safe Alternative Mobility Acts by Senator Ejercito. Senate Bill number 472, Safe Pathways Network Act, Senator Estrada. And we also have bills on sustainable transportation, SBN 20, Sustainable Transportation Act by this representation. Senate Bill number 243, Sustainable Transportation Act by Senator Lauren Legarda. So for today's hearing, we will focus on the Safe Pathways Safe Pathways Bill and cycling bills. I included sustainable transportation because they're interrelated, but we will not be able to finish it. So rest assured, those who have more to say on sustainable transportation, we will call you again later on in the succeeding hearings. But today, the goal is to just put on record once again what we discussed in the last Congress. The records from last year will actually, I will also include it in this year's in this Congress's records. So that's just a formality that we need to go through. And on that, with that in mind, then I don't think we need to have a very lengthy discussion because many of you are already familiar with it. Really think of it as this way: with every word that you utter, it is really convincing the public of our shared advocacy. Kasi pumasa na to, and I doubt that there is any. And even in the last Congress, when we introduced this for the first time, there was no resistance. There was just suggestions to improve the bill. So I expect the same. Okay, so okay, is he already there?
No, he's just submitting the opening
Okay,
statement to be read.
sure. Okay. Okay. Um, our majority floor leader, Senator Joel Villanueva, has an opening statement which he will just insert into the records. Okay, I think that's it. Yeah, okay. Okay. So I will first call on Dr. Tony Dance, Move as One Coalition, Professor, UP College of Law, and somebody who I relied upon a lot during the many hearings in the last few years. So Tony, you have the floor.
Thank you, Senator Pia, and good afternoon, everyone. I'll just
Sorry, I
read.
need to interject. Not related, but kailangan masabi. Syntax law. Dr. Tony Dance and his team and many others here, of course, Dr. Ho, of course naman yung grupo nyo. Pero my battle continues, and I need to say this because sabi ko nga yung job natin is to ensure that everybody realizes that the work they do in their committee, which they may think has nothing to do with health, has a lot to do with health. So on the e-cigs and vape bill that you guys have helped me fight against, we're now talking about safer modes of transportation, safer in the sense of non-pollutant. Pero as we do this, as we exert effort, as you as professionals use your precious time for this hearing, somewhere outside of this hearing room, they're promoting the use of vapes, e-cigs, and doing very little to stop the spread of cigarettes, smoking, and its ill effects. So keep that in mind because everybody here has the potential of joining us in really having a holistic approach, no? Because for me right now, it's fragmented. Trabaho tayo ng trabaho dito with our left hand, and then with our right hand, we're we're reducing the regulation, we're allowing private sector to dictate their path because of their own commercial needs. So anyway, have to say that. I will say that any opportunity I get. Okay, so Dr. Tony Dance, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Senator Pia. So thanks to the Senate Committee on Sustainable Development Goals. I'll read the short statement supporting the bills on active transport and sustainable transport. It's a good example of what you said, literally and figuratively, all roads lead to health. So as a citizen reading these proposed bills, I was very excited. But today, as a clinical epidemiologist, I'd like to focus on the health implications. Senator, I'd like to point out the three main health benefits, but also to point out two possible harms to health from these proposals. That they are avoidable harms, but I think worth pointing out. So starting with the good news, the three main benefits. The first pertains to benefit of active transport through an increase in physical activity. In 2019, my colleagues and I published the biggest study on this in the Lancet, and I'm happy to share it with the committee if necessary. We followed up 155,000 individuals from 21 countries around the world for nearly 10 years. And we showed that low physical activity increased the risk of cardiovascular disease, that's stroke and heart attack, by 20%. No? And increased the risk of death in the next 10 years by 40%. Unfortunately, studies show that people will not exercise just because we educate them about the health benefits. They need more than education. No? They need opportunities to exercise. And we feel this is what the bills on active transport can do. Prolong life through reduction of cardiovascular disease. And it's unique because prevention is usually expensive. As we prepare to implement the universal healthcare law, we will be allocating billions for medicines to treat diabetes and hypertension. And active transport is one of very few interventions where people can improve their health by spending less. So actually spending less on gas and vehicle maintenance and other transportation expenses. The second benefit is that with the pandemic, we're seeing this benefit more. There's a prevention of airborne infectious diseases such as COVID-19, influenza, tuberculosis, to name a few. Walking and cycling reduces our exposure to these organisms and can therefore reduce our risk for infection. In fact, studies are already coming up. One study shows that doing things in open space instead of enclosed space, uh, like cars and buses, can reduce the risk of COVID by 95%. The third benefit is gained by the public rather than the individual using active transport. There's an increase in active transport can reduce air pollution and carbon emissions from motorized vehicles. I think all the bills pointed this out. But I would like to add about 10 to 20% of cardiovascular disease around the world is attributable to pollution. And that's what we saw in the study I previously cited in 21 countries. So certainly the population, not just the individual who uses active transport, will benefit from facilities or infrastructure that encourages active transport. But now we go to the two possible harms. And the first is a potential increase in accidents. In general, but not always, accidents per kilometer are greater with bicycles than with motorized vehicles. The lives at risk from accidents is generally smaller, however, compared to the lives protected because of infection control and pollution reduction and physical activity. In addition, the deaths from accidents are preventable. So I love many of the measures mentioned in the bills, like educational programs, barriers, markings, and signs, and even the measure proposed by Senator Grace Poe, that having an annual carless day. Uh, but one of the strongest measures to prevent accidents from active transport has less to do with infrastructure. No, arguably one of the most important preventive measures is an increase in the number of bikers. No, numerous studies have shown this. The more bikers there are, the safer it becomes to bike. it's almost like the herd immunity that we see with vaccines. So I hope we can add a provision that will incentivize active transport. So the educational programs are great. The carless day per year is great. But maybe we can upgrade it to carless weekends or even carless zones, as has been done in many European countries. In Singapore, the Health Promotion Board encourages physical activity through a Lumi Health program that measures distance walk and provides vouchers for discounts on food and other facilities. Other countries are considering tax incentives for people who don't own cars. So these are all ways to increase the volume of bikers, which thereby also increase the safety of biking. The second potential harm has to do with the corollary need for an increased use of public transportation. And I guess this has more to do with sustainable transport, but I'd like to put in just a minute on it. We cannot provide bike lanes for biking or walking if our streets are filled with people using cars rather than an efficient public transport system. Unfortunately, there's a drawback because the goal of public transport is to increase the number of commuters per square meter. So there is a higher risk of airborne transmission. This can be big enough to overturn the infection prevention that we gain from active transport. Like accidents, however, it is preventable. All we need to do or add probably is a provision that assures good air quality inside the vehicle, not just outside. So now more than ever, this has become doable through the use of carbon dioxide monitors. No, I sent one to your office this morning, Senator Pia. I think it's in front of you. So just basically carbon dioxide is a major chemical that we excrete in our breath. So if CO2 levels are high in a room or vehicle, that means we are breathing air from the lungs of other people and we are at risk of acquiring infection. On one extreme end, clean atmospheric CO2 is 415 parts per million. No? And studies show that if CO2 is more than 1,000, you are at greater risk of catching airborne infections such as tuberculosis. But COVID-19 is much more transmissible than TB, so many authorities have advised a limit of 700 parts per million in vehicles and enclosed space. So there are many studies on this. I can send them to your office, but and strategies to improve CO2 in vehicles. Putting air cons on exhaust can reduce infection by 35% by reducing the CO2 levels. And simply opening a rear and front window or a ceiling hatch in a bus can reduce infection by 93%. So in summary, there are three benefits: cardiovascular disease, a reduction in infection, and a reduction in pollution. But there are two potential harms, both preventable: an increase in accidents and an increase in airborne transmission in public utility vehicles, which can be addressed through slight changes in the bills that were submitted. I hope these are helpful suggestions. Thank you very much, Senator Pia. I'm happy to answer questions if there are
Yes.
any.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Tony Dance. I had the opportunity, asan ba yung camera dito, no? I had the opportunity to show this, so for those who are watching this, what do you call this?
Dioxide monitor.
Carbon dioxide monitor. So, if you notice, we were briefly discussing with Senator Bato, and I showed it to him, and you answered his question, no, na what is the acceptable limit, 700. And my question, which you also answered, was once it gets close to that, how do you deal with it? And you said nga, open, if you're in a vehicle, then open the windows, if there are roof hatches, and so on and so forth. Maybe later on, we can even discuss this further. Maybe Senator Bato and I, since we're the one who heard you, can co-author a bill on how to improve this in transportation. Kasi that's where I also feel very, I mean, like me, in my space, I have control, no? technically, I don't have that much control kasi walang bintana. So, the most that I can do is open the one door that we have. But yeah, and I noticed kasi dun sa kabilang hearing, they're amending the building code. I don't know, there might be some input that you can provide, Tony, no? Kasi kung ganun ka-importante yung ventilation, baka that building code is the proper place. But the Sustainable Development Committee, this committee, can make those amendments. So you can also just send it to us.
Yes.
Anyway, let me just take the time to formally acknowledge the presence of Senator Bato de la Rosa. Thank you for being here, sir. We have some administrative matters to just settle, so let me just deal with this because it's just something that we have to do. We need to adopt the rules for this committee. Senator Bato?
Yes, Madam Chair. I move that we adopt the pertinent rules of the Senate and the rules of procedure governing inquiries in aid of legislation as the internal rules of the committee.
Any objections? Hearing none, the pertinent rules of the Senate and the rules governing inquiries in aid of legislation are hereby adopted as the rules of this committee. Thank you, Senator Bato. Okay, so Senator Bato, feel free, no, to interject anytime, questions, comments, just feel free because in between I will be just calling on the resource persons. Go
One
ahead, sir.
question. Yes, habang andito pa si Dr. Tony Dance. Sir, Doc, sinabi mo kanina na yung nga one of the measures para yung infection maiwasan or mabawasan is mag-open ka ng hatch or mag-open ka ng bintana sa sasakyan. How about in cases, Doc, na meron bang chance na ganito? Sabihin mo na, uy, pag nandoon ka sa environment na masyadong polluted, sabihin mo na, uy, can you stay inside your car so that you will be safe? Para sabihin natin na mas safe ka doon sa loob ng car mo kapag sarado yung car mo kaysa nasa labas ka. Pwede ba yun mangyari, Doc?
Good afternoon, Senator Bato. Yeah. In general, when you're in open air, unless siguro you're in a very polluted place, you are safer. Kasi the way that we clean the world or the earth cleans the air that we use is through dilution. So pagka nag-exhale tayo outdoors, yung hininga natin becomes dilute right away. It disperses right away. Unlike in enclosed space, like sa loob ho ng vehicle, ang airborne transmission and airborne particles, ang problema ho, lumulutang po siya, tumatagal, at naiipon. Yung tatlong yun ang problema sa indoor space. Lumulutang, tumatagal, at naiipon. So, lumalaki ho ang risk of transmission of airborne disease in enclosed space like rooms, no. Yung solution po pwedeng functional, dalawang klase, functional or structural. Yung functional solutions, opening windows and doors, dyan sa room na yan ho, you can face a fan towards the door para the used air is evacuated from the room. Bababa ho yung CO2 and you can check it right away. Or reducing the number of people in a room. No? In many classrooms in Europe, it's become a rule. Kung more than 700, open windows and doors. Kung mataas pa rin, you have to reduce the number of people or maybe call a break from classes. Pwede rin ho yan sa work. No? Meron ding structural solutions kasi kung minsan binuksan nyo na lahat ng bintana at pinto, mataas pa rin ang CO2. So ang structural solutions, changing the HVAC system, putting in an exhaust, parang yung mga ginagamit ho sa Korean restaurant, yung hindi may exhaust sila para pag nag-grill ka, nahihigop agad yung smoke. So putting in exhaust systems like that and improving your HVAC system are some of the structural solutions. Mas mahal lang at mas matagal po.
Thank you, Doc, for that answer.
Apo.
the reason why I ask you that question is, nangyari kasi yung kalakasan talaga ng COVID. Pagdaan namin sa isang barangay, sabi sa akin ng aide ko, "Sir, mag-close na ng bintana sir dahil grabe yung, grabeng positive ang daming positive dito sa barangay na ito sir. Baka
Opo.
makakuha tayo ng COVID." So that's why I ask you this question.
Opo.
Yun lang. Maraming salamat, Doc.
Yung mother ko, Senator Bato, is 94 years old. She carries a CO2 monitor wherever she goes. Lahat na ho ng tao sa bahay namin doon sa where she lives nagkasakit. Pero my mother, never in the past 2.5 years. We always make sure the CO2 around her, in her immediate surroundings, is controlled. So malaking bagay ho yung it's as important as vaccination in my opinion. And it can be done in the vehicles that we use for transport.
Can I clarify that, Tony, your statement, no? When you mentioned your mom, and as you know, I'm a fan of your mom. The mom of Dr. Tony is a very, very good artist, Araceli Dance. Anyway, when you mentioned the CO2 monitor, so whether it's this one in the office, Senator JV, ito yon, yung CO2 monitor that he gave me so we can understand. Then he said na may suot yung nanay nyo. Ang question ko is, in relation to COVID, because you related it to COVID, di ba? Sabi mo, siya na nagka-COVID na lahat, siya wala pa rin. So are you now saying that because when this is high, when the CO2 level is high, that means we are now breathing the air of other people. Therefore, the chances of us breathing whatever virus they have is also high. That's what,
Yeah.
is that, tama ba yung intindi ko?
That's right. It's
Okay.
parang an indirect measure of particulate matter in the air, mga airborne
Particulate
particles.
matter.
So pag
So in
mataas
other
ang
words,
CO2, madaming COVID. COVID can also be floating in the air.
so among whatever else is in the air, pag mataas yung particulate, how do you say it? Particulate matter?
Yes. Yes.
Pag mataas yun, and of course we are living in the time of COVID, then chances na nandun din ang COVID mataas. Yun lang naman yung point
Yes.
nun.
Yes.
So this now is an effective, so by association, you can associate now the level of COVID to the high level of CO2. Yun,
Yes.
okay. Di kasi kami
Instead of
scientists, so I'm trying to understand it simply.
instead of senators using 1 meter distance, less than 15 minutes to
O,
get
yun na
there,
pala.
or so many number of people in a room, you can actually monitor if these interventions are working by using ICO2 monitor rather than those random numbers like 1 meter and 15 minutes.
Wow. Okay, I can honestly say, and Senator JV is here, no, and like me, we've chaired the Committee on Health. Of course, I always learn something new when I attend the Committee on Health meetings, but I have to say, this is something new that I really, really knew. You know, normally, nadadagdagan lang yung knowledge ko doon, di ba? Or nakaklarify yung misconceptions. Pero ito, this is really something new, and I'm really proud na because of our discussions on safe pathways, napunta tayo dito. And Senator JVC, Dr. Dance even mentioned the pros and cons. Of course, the pros outweigh naman the cons, no? But for your information, because both gentlemen here are bikers, both pajak bikers like you and me, Dr. Tony, and also motor bikers, no? Of course, meron naman we cannot be in denial na one of the downside lang is accidents. Pero na ano naman 'yon, no? Na meron namang mga solutions doon. And sabi nga niya, one solution is more bikers. Kasi the more bikers there are, the more the other road users are familiar with bikers being on the road, the more they, normally kasi nag-iisa lang ako dun sa Tagaytay, yung nagsisermon ng mga umaatras sa amin. So kung mas marami tayo, hindi ko na kailangan mag-sermon, pwede nang sabi, boss, kita-kita mo naman, dalawa lang ang gulong namin, napakanipis pa. There's more of us, no, having these discussions. Okay, we let Dr. Tony Dance go unless you have questions, Senator JV, kay Dr. Tony. Okay, Because we
Thank
have
you.
other resource persons, and I forgot to mention, but we're only here until around 5 minutes to 3 because we're not allowed to have hearings while we are in session. So thank you so much, Tony.
Thank
Let me
you.
formally, thank you. Let me formally acknowledge the presence of Senator JV. And Senator JV, you're free to, there are just a few of us. I have no rules. You can make your comments. If you'd like to make an opening statement, would you like to? Because
Thank
Senator
you.
JV is one of the authors of the bills we're hearing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just happy to attend this afternoon's hearing headed by the good chairperson, a fellow cyclist, Senator Pia. I'd like to manifest my support to any measure that will promote better and alternative mode of transportation for kababayan. So, just last week, I delivered my privilege speech regarding comprehensive master plan, especially for infrastructure development. But while we await those infra development and modern trains and others, we need alternative transportation, and one of the best and more practical is the use of bicycles. So I'm very happy and glad that with Sen Bato here, Sen Pia, and yours truly, probably we can push more and support more infra, especially for alternative modes of transport, especially bicycles and others. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator JV. Very happy that the two gentlemen are with here. But an important information, sayang wala na si Dr. Tony Dance, pero ano naman to, recorded para makita niya. Oh, yung binigay niyang monitor, kanina 500 lang to. Eh, nung dumating si Senator JB, naging 600 na. Tsaka, for information, in fairness, hindi lang si Senator JB yung nadagdag. Siguro may kasama kang staff. Tapos nadagdagan din ng isang media. Kanina isang camera lang yan, di ba? Tama ba? Kasi pagtingin ko isang, oh, tamo. Ngayon dalawa. So tumataas talaga habang dumadami tao, di ba? Anyway, I'm not saying naman na maraming carbon dioxide na dala si Senator JB, pero
Madam Chair,
yes.
Madam Chair, I think it's already close to critical level. Close to 700 na yan eh. 600 plus na eh.
No, but if we will follow, the expert, pag ito lumabas ng 700, palalabasin ko na po itong dalawang magigiting na kasama ko. Bawas-bawasan natin, okay? Kasi ako, di ako co-convener of Move As One Coalition, Dr. C has been very instrumental in pushing for active transportation, not only in our hearings, but also in public. And I appreciate that kasi sometimes we're just preaching to the choir. Tayo-tayo lang ang nagkakaintindihan. So when you go out and talk about this through various means, it really helps this cause. So on that note, Dr. C, you have roughly 5 minutes. I forgot to mention, no, but roughly 5 minutes for every resource person, because when we have time in the end, then you can add what you want to say. But just to be sure na matapos ko naman lahat ng resource persons natin. So go ahead, Dr. C, and then after that, please be ready, Attorney Goya Larrazabal.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Senator Pia, for inviting us. And we would like to, at the start, mention that we fully support the bills on safe pathways and bike lanes. And we would happily volunteer our time to help in the consolidation of the bills and any additional language that will enhance the value of the bill. So I have a few slides, Madam Chair, and maybe I can go through them. Next slide, please. So we are already very much in a transport crisis, and one of the great opportunities is to enhance, the opportunity for safe walking and cycling. Next slide, please. The low-hanging fruit is really in terms of improving our safe pathways and bike lanes so that people who are on short trips, meaning those, say, 5 kilometers or less, will choose walking and cycling over a private motor vehicle. And there are, of course, advantages with also encouraging public transport users to adopt walking and cycling because it will free up additional space on our very limited public transport. Next slide, please. When we talk about the importance of this, the set of bills, it's really also about what we might call transport justice. It's really about democratizing our available assets that we have in the form of our roads. When we look at the number of households that own bicycles versus those that own cars, the households that own bicycles outnumber households with cars by a factor of 4 to 1. So, social weather stations measured in May that there were 20% of households who own bicycles and only 5% of households nationwide that own cars. Next slide, please. And when we look at the travel pattern, the travel demand, here is Greater Manila. We can see 80% of daily travel is either by public transport or active transport. So really the vast majority of trips are by people who do not own cars. Next slide, please. And today, when we look at our transportation crisis, what we are seeing is more and more Filipinos taking to using bicycles as their form of travel. So this is again from from the social weather stations survey, which showed that between 2020 and 2021, just in NCR, the percentage of households with bicycles increased from 17% to 36%. So that's dramatic. It really shows that many households today are choosing to cycle. Some of them are choosing out of interest, but many are also choosing out of necessity. Next slide, please. And we can see this everywhere, when we visit malls today, any available bike rack, bike parking is filled. And so this is one of the things. End of trip facilities is part of your bills. We need to make sure this is sustained and implemented by all our agencies and also by our private sector. Next slide, please. Uh, Filipinos want more walkable and bikeable cities, and this is what we can see from various surveys of the also from social weather stations. 85% nationwide want walkable and bikeable cities. Next slide, please. Legislation that we have today, one of the values is that it will clarify that walking and cycling deserve priority over private motor vehicles. And this is actually what will give, in a way, the additional impetus of our line agencies and local governments to take action to introduce safe walking and cycling. Next slide, please. I'll just skip this. We already have heard, about the great value of walking and cycling, and other speakers will talk about this. Next slide, please. I also want to highlight a report called Bikeonomics, which was prepared by Alt Mobility PH, which presents and quantifies the many benefits of cycling. And we would recommend that this be distributed to all members of our committee, as well as all our public agencies that have a stake in better walking and cycling. Next slide, please. We already have good policies on transport through the National Transport Policy. Next slide, please. And in here, the National Transport Policy, it already mentions that highest priority should be for the development of proper sidewalks and networks of bicycle lanes. Next slide, please. We also have many issuances of different key agencies, particularly DOTR, DPWH, DILG, and DOH. Next slide, please. And even in the new fiscal framework of the Marcos administration, there is a provision encouraging active transport. So this is very much in line with the directives and directions of the current administration. Next slide, please. I'd like to go now into just 7 slides that will sum up our comments on the various bills, if you would allow me. First of all, we advise that the law should avoid language that depict bike lanes only as an emergency response or temporary, such that they could be removed after the emergency is over. I believe we have seen that better cycling and walking infrastructure should be a part of our long-term strategy to make our cities more livable and improve the quality of life of Filipinos. It should be a permanent measure. Next slide, please. Even though bike lanes may start as pop-up, we need durable and high quality bike lanes everywhere. And what we must also note is that many of the pop-up bike lanes are deficient in that there are still many obstructions and hazards on the road which need to be corrected. So these are areas where the proposed bills can highlight the need for additional resources to make the pavement smooth, remove things like the grate here that could trap the wheels of our cyclists, and even the potholes that we see on many bike lanes. Next slide, please. Bike lanes should physically separate cyclists from motor vehicles. So the idea that paint is sufficient is not a good recommendation. All over the world, the global best practice and really the best safety measure is to have physical separation between the motor vehicles and the cyclists. Next slide, please. Pedestrians and cyclists deserve priority in the allocation of road space. So this was one of the points highlighted earlier. And here we have a picture of one of the bike lanes that was recently installed. And here we see that it is only as narrow as a person's shoulders. It's certainly a substandard bike lane. And one reason given by the implementers was that there was not sufficient road space. But here we see that again, the conventional or traditional approach is to prioritize road space for cars and leave whatever is the residual to pedestrians and cyclists. This is unacceptable, and we hope that the law will clarify to all that pedestrians and cyclists deserve the priority, and perhaps the residual can be for the minority of car owners. Next slide, please. So again, when we talk about priority on roads, a social weather station survey showed that the majority of Filipinos want roads to be prioritized for pedestrians, cyclists, and public transport, regardless of their geographical area or income class. So many car users also voted to give priority to pedestrians, cyclists, and public transport. Next slide, please. The law should avoid language that restricts cyclists only to bike lanes. And what we know is that very often a cyclist needs to go outside of the bike lane to turn left to avoid a hazard. Maybe the bike lane is overcrowded. The road space should be available to all road users, while the bike lane provides protection for the vulnerable cyclist. But the bike user should not be penalized for going outside of the bike lane. I think that should be an important point embodied in the law. Next slide, please. We've also heard from Dr. Tony Dance designating a road as a slow street or car-free street is also a very valuable initiative and could be one of the options that could be promoted under the proposed bills. Thank you. Next slide, please. Elevated footbridges, we would just want to mention that we should avoid advocating elevated footbridges because it is considered not a safe or acceptable option for pedestrians. Wherever possible, we need to have at-grade crossings. And this is also not only for safety, but also for inclusivity. Because once we require the pedestrian to climb stairs, we automatically exclude perhaps about 10% of our population who are not able to climb stairs. Next slide, please. Safety education, we would like to recommend that the focus should be on the drivers of motor vehicles rather than on the cyclist, although we believe pedestrians and cyclists should also have safety education. But the priority for education needs to be the drivers of motor vehicles who are the main killers of pedestrians and cyclists. Next slide, please. The law should also avoid introducing requirements or rules that could discourage cycling or create barriers to entry. So here we're talking about perhaps requirements for licensing, or maybe requirements for helmets or lights or other types of devices. Those, of course, should be highly recommended, but once we make that mandatory, it will be exclusionary. It will be anti-poor. People will be discouraged from taking up cycling. So as much as possible, we should avoid any measure which will impose or create a barrier to entry. Next slide, please. So that's it. Thank you very much po, and we would be happy to answer any questions later. Thank you po.
Thank you very much, Dr. C. That was very enlightening and very thorough. With your permission, I'll be using some of your slides. Of course, I will acknowledge now that they're your slides when we sponsor this and also to promote this now on social media. Thank you. We won't ask any questions muna for now so that we can finish all the resource persons. Let me call on Attorney Goyo Larazabal, co-founder of Bicicleta Pilipinas Coalition. And then kindly be ready. After him would be Mr. Matthew Magbalana. Go ahead, Goyo. Wait, ayan, mute, unmute.
There,
All
better.
right.
Thank you very much for having us as part of this meeting. H.G. Wells once said, "Every time I see an adult on a bicycle, I no longer despair for the future of the human race." Cycling is and should be a viable means of transportation. That should be the goal of the Philippines. When we say cycling as a viable means of transportation, we look at other countries and other cities. One city in particular is Amsterdam. But these cities did not start from there. They were not always a bicycle-friendly city. In the 70s, if you look at pictures of Amsterdam, you would show the city with a lot of traffic gridlock. But they changed the way they did things. They worked together to make things better. Another city right now making waves is Boston City, where in which the mayor Mayor Wu, does regular bicycle rides with residents of the city. What this does is it encourages people to look at cycling as a mode of getting to where you want. Um, in the Philippines kasi, in a lot of places, the people live within 10 kilometers from the workplace. If you live and work in the same city, chances are the distance to your workplace is about 5 kilometers. A 5 kilometer distance is too long to walk for many, but it is very doable on a bicycle. In fact, it's easier to ride a bicycle within 5 kilometers instead of driving a car. Because if you drive a car, you'll be stuck in gridlock. You have to pay for parking. There are many instances where you get in late because of circumstances beyond your control. And that's what we look at cycling. No, cycling is when you bike to your destination. You know when you're going to arrive. You say, okay, I leave my house. I get in my office at after 10 or 20 minutes. In if you ride, especially now in Metro Manila, you don't know because you might get stuck in traffic gridlock and your 30 minutes becomes 2 hours. Cycling actually is not only a way of helping the commuter, it's actually helping the country and helping the world because it helps with minimizing our carbon footprint, which is very important to the environment. A lot of people are looking at minimizing their carbon footprint by buying hybrid vehicles, electric vehicles, and in Japan now they're looking at hydrogen powered vehicles. They look at these vehicles because they want to lower their carbon footprint. But we can actually leapfrog over all those other countries by with reference to human powered vehicles, which is the bicycle. Because there's hardly any carbon footprint if the passenger is the engine. You don't need gasoline, you don't need diesel, you don't need to charge it, you just need to pedal. Um, that's why long term it's going to be good for you, also the world. Now, what we look at, how do we improve this is, I heard the two doctors kanina and they had very good inputs. One of the key important factors in making it successful is infrastructure. Um, the cyclist must be incentivized to want to ride his or her bicycle or scooter. What does this mean? You don't merely look at public infrastructure, but you look at private infrastructure. There are several bills, including the bill of the chairwoman, which mandates or requires putting up infrastructure facilities like parking, etc. However, there are ways to encourage it further, if we may suggest, by um, making it more beneficial to the cyclists or workers to bike to work. I mean, say if I bike to my workplace but- which is 5 kilometers away, if I park my bike, that's good, but I cannot work the whole day in sweat and I'm sweating, diba? So, private infrastructure includes facilities for the person to take a shower, to change, and in some places, for example, in Portland, Oregon, the private companies there give food coupons to their employees. What this means is if I ride my bike to work, um, the company my friend owns, I'll be given a food coupon, a lunch coupon, so I don't have to pay for my lunch. So that encourages me to ride my bicycle to work because I save money for my lunch, diba? And I know that when I get there, uh, there's adequate parking, safe and adequate parking. There's a locker, and there's facilities for me to change before I go to work. Now, there is something which we would like to emphasize now in section 5 of Senate Bill number 19. There's a health loop. Let me double check. Health facilities loop. The LGUs, if I may read the sections, LGUs shall coordinate with health facilities within their jurisdiction to establish pop-up bicycle lanes, slow streets, and provide safe access to healthcare workers. This is something which has to be looked at because I've driven around the country, Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao. In many cases, the barangays do not have a working and functional barangay health center. The barangay health center, manned by BHWs or barangay health workers, normally have just a BP monitor, and that's it. So, for example, if I bike to work and if I unfortunately get into an accident in one barangay, if I'm brought to the barangay health center for first aid, um, probably 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 instances, there's no bandages, there's no alcohol, there's no medicines to treat my wounds. So this has to be looked at because if I'm riding either to work or for recreational purposes, for example, Senator Batog bikes to Cavite. When you bike around and if something happens to one of your companions and you need medical support, you bring that person, the cyclist, to the barangay health center. If you bring that person to the barangay health center, again, chances are there's going to be no medical equipment or facilities or even bandages to help uh, with the help um, the the cyclists. So that's something that has to be looked at aside from infrastructure, aside from other things that was mentioned. You look at how the barangays itself can be viable partners to assist people who use a bicycle to work. And if they have those facilities, for example, if they have bandages, they have alcohol, betadine, they can also provide medical health services to residents of the barangay. So far those are our comments, but we are in full support of the bills to make a cycling as a viable means of transportation, not to replace the vehicle, but as an alternative to those existing modes of transportation to help the commuters. Thank you very much, Chairwoman.
Thank you for that, Attorney Goyo Larazabal. I was particularly concerned, no, with your statement that uh, a lot of barangay health centers would not have the basics to address any untoward accident, no, that bikers would go through. I think I'm going to be fairly confident in saying that Taguig would have those
Okay.
kasi we're very strict about it. And before I call on the next resource person that I mentioned earlier, Mr. Matthew Magbalana, um, I'll just mention that we have another resource person, although he's not present right now. If he comes later, I'll have him address this. But if not, just to let the members of the members, those attending, we really are trying to have this hearing as comprehensive as possible in a very short period of time because one of our resource persons is Councilor Yaser Pangandaman, Councilor of Taguig. And precisely, I was going to tell him, given the concern that Attorney Goyo Larazabal mentioned, not just for Taguig, because like I said, I'm confident about Taguig.
Sorry. Sorry.
But to take
Okay.
this up, no, no, but to take this
Yeah.
up because meron din yan organizations of councilors eh. So for them to take it up in their nationwide meetings, that this is a valid concern, di ba? And in fact, not just for the bikers, but as I said, it's all interconnected. For all the other accident that could happen where we want to ensure that these are present. And if not for the time constraints, I would have jumped in the hearing ongoing in the other room in the Committee on Health. Because actually one of my requests, it's actually the request also of Senator Alan, is to really find out what is the state of every barangay health center. Obviously, those that belong to cities like Taguig, where we put a priority on it and we do have the resources, napaprioritize talagang healthcare. But we wanted to know how it is really all over the country. So anyway, thank you for that particular intervention and for your whole uh, presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
So let's now go on. As I said, no, Mr. Matthew Magbalana, who is a rider. Sir, you have the floor. Ayan, nandiyan na
Um,
siya.
Dr. Pia at sa mga bisita po. As a bikers po lang, sinusugundahan ko lang po yung sinabi po ni Mr. Greg kanina. Ang Taguig po naman ay meron po kaming bike patrol na rumoronda po yon. Nag-iikot po yun sa bike lanes para kung makatitignan kung mga bikers po ay may nadisgrasya, nasiraan. Yung mga bike patrols po namin, yun po yung nag-a-assist, gumagawa. May mga dala rin po silang mga medical kits kung sakali may nadisgrasya. Isa lang po, ang pangkaraniwan lang po ng problema naming mga bikers, yung talaga yung bike lane po, yung medyo marami po lang mga ganyan, drainage na sabi ko. Tatanong ko lang po kung mabuti po ba na yung bike lane lagyan po ba ng mga bollard? Kasi isa din mo sa nakakadiskasa yung bollard.
Yung bollards po. Ano yun?
Bollard.
Yung
Yan.
parang bollards.
Nakakadisgrasya po sa mga motorista, magiging cause po rin na aksidente. Kung po pwede po sana, kasi naman po, ang mga bike naman po ako, bikers po ako, dito po sa Pilipinas, masyado lang ano lang naman natin, hindi naman po kami 24 hours na nasa kalye. Ang pinaka-busy po lang naman namin talaga is minsan Sabado at Linggo, na gamit lang po talaga yan. Kasi kung mga ka-bollards po, talagang hindi po din nadadaanan ng ibang sasakyan. May mga kasi pag city drive po, aminin po natin na hindi, dito lang po natin pag city drive po, napakasigip po ng kalye. Kasi pag dumating po kayo ng Rizal, narin po 6, 8 lanes po dyan ng kalye, anindo po yan, hindi po pa highway yan, city lang po yan noon. Napakaluwag po. Pero dito po sa atin po sa Pasig, sa Taguig, sa mga Makati, at lalagyan pa po natin ng malaking bike lanes, mawawalan na po ng espasyo naman po yung mga motorista natin. Yung mga beach road po, kung pwede naman po kami din na nasa tabi na lang po kami. Pero ang i-prioritize po lang naman natin, yung mga malalaking kalye lang po na po pwedeng lagyan ng bike lanes. At kung maaari po, wag na pong lagyan ng bollards. Kung po pwede po, sana yung cones na lang. Kasi alam ko, medyo po mahal po iyon. Pero, o di kaya, guhit lang po kasi sa Pasig po, okay lang po eh. Sa Taguig, meron din po. At saka lang po yung iba pong ginawa dito sa C6, maganda po yung ano namin, maluwag po yung bike lanes namin sa C6 sa Taguig. Ang problema lang po, paglagpas po ng Taguig, paglagpas po ng Napindan, Pasig, pwede ko na rin po sa inyo, Ma'am Pia, kasi po ginawa na po silang tindahan. Meron po doon, mahigit na po silang tindahan na nasa bike lanes. Malaki po yun, yung tinatawag ng Parisan, Lugawan. Sinakop na po na nila yung buong bike lanes. Ang bike lanes po is pumapatak po yun ng halos isang sasakyan po na malaki kasya po sa bike lanes ng Taguig. Yung sa hanggang Taytay Arenda po. Nasakop na po ng mga tindahan ng mga lugaw at ang mga pares. Sa amin lang ang mga...
Sir, okay, ganito. Excited ako na nakapagsalita kayo, pero yung mga details nung request nyo sa Taguig, alam nyo naman, ako nang bahala kay Mayor Lani dyan, okay? Hindi na natin kailangan na i-discuss ngayon dahil limited ang panahon natin, ano? So, yung experience nyo lang is yung maganda naman yung katanungan nyo na dapat ba yung may mga bollards and i-discuss natin yan sa mga experts, no? Kanina si Dr. Singa, sabi niya, talagang mas maganda na may mga barriers, no? So, pero yung specifics na tanong nyo, doon tayo sa Taguig natin ipag-uusapan yon. Kasi ito naman hearing lang natin sa kahalagahan ng pagbibisikleta. Okay? Okay.
Basta
May dadagdag
sa
pa
amin.
ho ba kayo?
Okay, thank you po, ma'am. Thank you po.
Okay, thank you. So, ang next speaker natin is Mr. William Francis Mariano, who is the head of the Mobility Office in Taguig.
Hello, good afternoon po, Senator Pia Cayetano, and to all representatives here in this meeting. So again, my name is Will Mariano from the Taguig Mobility Office, and I'll be just presenting the efforts of the city regarding sustainable transportation. The start of my agenda for today, for today's presentation, will be briefly discussing the legislations of the city on sustainable transportation, discussing how the city planned our bicycle lane network, and also to briefly go over the other cycling programs and other active transport efforts of the city of Taguig. Next slide, please. So first and foremost, we in the city of Taguig we have two major legislations on sustainable transportation. First being would be the mobility ordinance, which was crafted and signed back in 2019, and this ordinance created the mobility office of Taguig. So the mobility office is just in charge of conducting studies and implementing programs related to sustainable transportation, such as cycling and walking, road safety, concerns on public transportation, and traffic schemes. Additionally, we also have the bike friendly ordinance, which was signed back in 2020. And this created the Active Transport Office. So, by its name, its objective is just to plan and implement programs and projects related to cycling, to walking, to skateboarding, and to personal mobility devices such as e bikes and e scooters. So for the bike lane network of the gig, so the first thing that we had to find out was what kind of cyclists do we have in our city. So we conducted a survey with about 543 respondents, and about to classify themselves on what kind of cyclist do they think they are. So 7% of them mentioned that they belong to the baguhan o hindi ganong sanay, which means these are our beginners. Next would be the sanay pero nababahala minsan, and lastly would be mahusay at walang takot. And I would like to point out, two-thirds of them answered that they belong to the sanay pero nababahala minsan. Meaning they are comfortable with cycling along our roads, but they have a lot of concerns they want to address. So we delved deeper into that, and we found out they had three major concerns. Next slide, please. First would be to have a network of protected bicycle lanes all over the city. So that's the highest priority that they wanted to bring up with the city. Second would to have safe and accessible bicycle parking in all of our public spaces and office buildings, and also to have end of trip facilities as well. And lastly, to have a focus on education and enforcement on bike lane regulations. Next slide, please. But as a city, what did we have to consider when setting up our own network of bike lane? First, our top priority is to have separation and the allocation of safety barriers as much as possible, to expand our bicycle lane into intersections and ensure full connectivity of all of our bike lanes. And lastly, we also consider speed limits and traffic calming whenever necessary. So next slide, please. So since 2018 up until now, the city of Taguig has established over 60 kilometers worth of bicycle lanes all over the city. And about 30 kilometers of those are protected bike lanes with either traffic cones or bollards. And as you can see here, the blue line represents the current network that we have. But more importantly, I want to discuss that the city does not stop from there. So the green lines represent the planned network or the planned expansion of our bicycle lane network, which will hopefully connect every cyclist in Taguig to every corner of the city. And the tiny dots that you can see here are just the essential establishments and essential services within the city, such as public spaces, plazas, malls, groceries, schools, which we intend to put the necessary bicycle parking and end of trip facilities. Next slide, please. So these are just some of the sample designs that we have in the city of Taguig. So as you can see here on the left would be Cayetano Boulevard, which we have a protected 6 feet bicycle lane. For Bayani Road and Loton, we have a mixture of both. We have a protected bicycle lane and also a pop-up bike lane along Loton, which we are monitoring and continuously studying. And lastly, we have the C6 bike road, which is a completely separated bike lane, which our cyclists can enjoy some greenery and the view of Laguna Lake while they're passing by. Next, but aside from the cycling infrastructure, we also deal with a lot of other relative programs in order to holistically build up this active transport cycling community within the city. So first would be a lot of community engagements. Next slide, please. So in the city of Taguig, we have a Bike Taguig Facebook group, which is composed of over 24,000 members. which are cyclists and enthusiasts. And this is the place or the space wherein they voice out their concerns and comments and feedback to the city government. We also conduct face-to-face and online interviews or focus group discussions. So we can involve the cycling community in our planning phase. And lastly, we hold and celebrate events such as World Car Free Day and World Bicycle Day, and hold community rides for the entire community. Next slide, please. So we also conduct a lot of information campaigns for us to gather feedback and also to educate not just our cyclists but especially our motorists as well. And lastly, we also involve our traffic management enforcers by allocating some bicycles for them so that they will be partners of the city in regulating our bicycle lanes. And as mentioned by Sir Mats earlier, we also have a dedicated task force that we call the Bike Patrol, which their only job is to roam around our bicycle lanes to ensure that there are no obstructions and to serve as a helping hand to any cyclist that needs any help. Next slide, please. So aside from all the cycling related programs and projects that we have, the city also uh, conducts a lot of studies to improve the overall active transport climate in the city. So we have road safety audits and walkability studies wherein our goal is just to evaluate and assess the current status of our roads and streets and recommend concrete actions to lessen the risk of accidents, to increase the perception of safety or of road safety along these streets, and also to improve the overall walkability along these roads. Next slide. So just to show you guys, we have a case study of here in Bayani Road. So our office recently conducted a walkability study along Bayani Road. And for context, for the entire 2.3 kilometer stretch of Bayani Road, there's only one formal crossing facility along this stretch. And we saw a lot of problems with that, and we engaged with our barangays in order to study this area. So next slide, please. So this is just one of the recommendations that we have. So we're planning to install more than 12 crossing facilities all over Bayani Road with the and accompany that with the necessary traffic calming schemes. Next slide, please. As you can see here, this is part of the bike lanes that we have in Bayani Road. But one problem that we saw here would be there are no spaces allocated for our pedestrians. So what usually happens is that our pedestrians typically walk along the bicycle lanes, which our cyclists would need to avoid and go out of our bicycle lane. So what our proposal would be to just occupy one car lane. And next slide, please, and to really address the needs of both our cyclists and our pedestrians that are usually populating this portion of Bayani Road. So all of these are just some of the efforts conducted or continuously being done by the city government of Taguig in regards to sustainable transportation. As I would just like to point out that the city of Taguig is continuous with these efforts as we believe that sustainable transportation is the future of mobility within our city, and this is the future that we want for our constituents. That's it. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Just for the record, we also, you might say I'm biased for Taguig. Of course, obvious naman yon. I am. I am familiar kasi with Taguig's efforts, both under the leadership of our current mayor, Lani Cayetano, and our former mayor, Lino Cayetano, on promoting the use of active transportation, particularly bike lanes. But I also want to put on record that I am also familiar with the implementation of bike lanes and the support that the province of Iloilo is getting. So we also invited somebody from Iloilo. Unfortunately, I believe he's confirmed, but he's here now. Okay, very good. Sige. So I was going to ask some questions, but let's hear from the representative from Iloilo, Ted Ong, who is an Iloilo rider. Mr. Ted Ong, you have the floor.
Hi, Senator. Good afternoon, and good afternoon to our colleagues in the who are attending right now. Unfortunately, I was not able to prepare a presentation for this
Okay
hearing.
lang. You can share na lang your experience, your what benefits it has brought the province, any recommendations for other LGUs who also would like to do the same, whatever you want to share. And pwede ba kayong on ng video? Is that possible because it's better so we can see you?
Yes, my video is ready on. Uh, yes, no, in the past years, and I'm sure Senator Cayetano is also aware that the local government of Iloilo had been investing a lot of resources, no, to build a more bikeable city. And currently, in the last 2 years, I guess, has been one of the benefits, no, of building our bike infrastructure was more prominent, no, because of the pandemic, no, the exponential number of bikers has increased, and in some years before that, our bike infrastructure are somehow underutilized, but it has been expanded, no, in the last 2 years, and the bikeability has improved. The bike population had increased, and Iloilo City, um, apart from the infrastructure, it also initiated a lot of collaboration with the different sector. So I guess one of perhaps more lacking in Iloilo is still a complementary program, soft programs to improve road safety, improve the bike culture, and perhaps programs that would invite private sector to also take part, no, and invest in building Iloilo City as a bike capital of the Philippines. So far, that's some of my points, Senator Cayetano.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Ted Ong. Very quick response lang. I liked what you said about more information on bike safety, bike culture, and ito, hindi ko tuloy maintindihan yung sulat ko. Private sector. Private sector participation. Maganda lahat yan. I support all of that. And I particularly like what you said about the bike culture, no? Because no matter what we do to promote bike safety, kung hindi tanggap yung bike culture na yan, the culture itself, di ba? If it's not something ingrained in our day-to-day life, then we will always be parang hirap na hirap tayo to promote it, di ba? So maganda talaga yung bike culture. Let's work on that some more. Thank you very much. Let me just quickly go
Thank you.
back to the representative of Taguig Mobility, no? Again, because of lack of time, I won't be able to go into this that much. But one of the things that I have always been impressed about are the innovations that I see, and one of them is yung bike patrol, no? But just to be clear, are they exclusively dedicated to promote and to ensure the safety, and sabi mo nga yung to ensure that there are no obstructions, that's their primary job, or they also are involved in non-bike related tasks?
The bike patrol is exclusively for
Mhm.
bicycle related patrolling, but we
Okay.
also include them in a lot of our community group rides. And as mentioned by Sir Mats earlier, they're also trained in basic life services training, so they also provide some first aid if needed, or some basic bike maintenance to
Okay.
our cyclists.
Okay. Okay. I am going to suspend the hearing for not more than 5 minutes because precisely to promote this and a few other concerns, I will rush to the Committee on Health hearing. But I will be back in 5 minutes. So for the other resource persons, I'll ask the Secretariat to tell you to be ready so that I can jump in and complete it. Thank you. Sorry for that, but as I said, no, our job in sustainability is to ensure that we are all interconnected. So I had to give my interventions there. So because I try to use less paper. I am dependent on my digital, which has just died. So the next person to speak, we have quite a few, no? So may I ask that we be strict with the time so that we do not run out. Everybody can speak, no? From DOTR, USEC, Annelie Lontok is here. Hello, ma'am. Mauna na kayo. And then after you, let's be ready, DPWH, then MMDA. And then I don't know if Dr. Beverly Ho is still here, but later on, if she's still here, I'll ask her to make a statement as well. So please proceed, USEC Lontok.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Good afternoon also to the Madam Chairperson, Senator Pia Cayetano, and the members of the committee and the other participants in today's hearing. Uh, on behalf of the department and Secretary Jaime Bautista, I would like to extend our utmost appreciation and gratitude to the honorable senators for pushing these bills which aim to further institutionalize active transportation. As one of the lead agencies aiming to promote and encourage the use of active transportation, the department is truly grateful for the Senate's initiative to craft an essential policy institutionalizing active transport use in the country. The eventual approval of this bill shall solidify the role of sustainable transport in the nation's socioeconomic growth and will recognize the programs developed by the government agencies supporting the said cause. The bills will significantly support the department's projects as this mandate national government agencies, LGUs, and other organizations to implement programs, projects, and policies for the improvement of infrastructure, prioritize sustainable modes of transportation, and promote safety for all road users, among others. Further, the bills introduced innovative activities and policies that will serve as tools for the appropriate agencies to forward their endeavors toward a more sustainable transport system. As we highly welcome the passage of the bills, we have provided comments and inputs as requested by the committee based on the department's experience for the past 2 years in implementing active transport projects for consideration of the committee. So we are submitting today our comments and inputs, Madam Chairperson. This department suggests among the highlights the consolidation of the Senate bills as presented. Further, we see that it is vital for the policy success to institutionalize and harmonize the mandates and functions of each government agency by creating a sustainable transport committee. This will ensure the law's effective, efficient implementation should it reach its approval. Lastly, the consolidated policy must also set the road users hierarchy, clearly stating the importance of active transport and the priority for the most vulnerable in accordance with the National Transport Policy issued by the NEDA Board in 2017. The DOTR, other NGAs and LGUs are mandated by National Transport Policy to promote active transportation through implementing projects and policies to include active transport infrastructure in the overall transport framework. The RA 11494 or Bayanihan 2 law in accordance with the Bayanihan 8-2 and through funds, the funds provided by the same law, the DOTR together with the Department of Public Works were able to build 497 kilometers of bike lane networks in Metro Manila, Cebu, and Davao. This year, the DOTR and DPWH completed the east and south expansion of the Metro Manila network, which spans 67 kilometers, extending the 497-kilometer metropolitan bike lane networks to 564 kilometers. Metro Manila network total 380 kilometers. The DOTR also lauds the effort of LGUs endeavoring to make their localities cycling and walking friendly. Last year, the Active Transport TWG, the DOTR, DOH, DILG, DPWH recognize the LGUs of Iloilo, Pasig, and Quezon City and Taguig by awarding them the gold, silver, bronze awards and a runner-up award, respectively, in the National Bike Lane Awards 2021 for their exceptional efforts to promote active transportation. Further, the RA or the GAA 2022 provided the DOTR funds of 2 billion to implement active transportation projects through the Active Transport Bike Share System and Safe Pathways Program. So this includes several components: maintenance of existing infrastructure, upgrading of existing infrastructure, expansion of existing, establishment of bicycle end-of-trip facilities, installation of data collection infrastructure, implementation of bike share system, construction, improvement of public transport stops. So together with our statement in this meeting and the other, and our submission, we we support the Senate in its passage of the bill on sustainable transport, Madam Chairperson.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. We're happy to have on record again the support of DOTR for this administration. We hope to work more closely with you, no, for the full implementation as we move on. Okay, so let me now call on DPWH ASEC Eric Ayapana.
Ma'am,
Over there. Okay.
yeah,
Time check lang everyone. We have less than 15 minutes. Kasama na yung pagtakbo
Yes.
ko, literally, going
yes.
to session. Kasi I want to be able to call on Dr. Hoden. So after ASEC Eric, MMDA, and then I'll call on Dr. Ho. Go ahead.
A pleasant good afternoon, Madam Senator, the chairperson of this committee. With me is the directors of the Bureau of Design, Danilo Balice, and the Bureau of Construction, Director Aristarco Duroy. The outbreak of COVID-19 affected many various industries and businesses in the country, including some adjustments in the employment arrangement in which employees are not required to physically report to work, which is what we call work from home. Although this type of arrangement might work on some professions, some type of work will still require the employees to attend physically. This became a hindrance to those commuting public affected by the limitation of the allowed passenger for public transportation. This is one of the initial response of the national government to avoid or to minimize the transmission of the virus, causing the public to use alternative modes of transportation. A good example to this is the use of bicycle as a daily mode of transport when going to work, buying groceries, etc. Along this line, DPWH, in collaboration with the Department of Transportation, has issued Joint Administrative Order together with the Joint Administrative Order 2020-001, which stipulates the guidelines on the promotion of active transport after the COVID-19 pandemic. The DPWH, who functions as the engineering and construction arm of the government, is committed to provide the Filipino people with quality, safe, and environmental-friendly public infra facilities that will improve the life of every Filipino. This includes the promotion of active modes of transportation with the government, the the department through its DO number 88, series of 2020, prescribed the use of uniform design of bicycle facilities to achieve a consistent approach that will meet the needs and safe access of bicycles and other road users. Moreover, all projects of the department that will involve new road and bridge construction or future expansion to relieve traffic congestion, such as road or bridge widening, bypasses, among others, shall include in its design the provision of bicycle facility if feasible and based on the studies of the department. As of date, the department has constructed bike lanes along different regions in the country which are not being used up to now. Along this line, our office, the PWAs, wholeheartedly support the proposed Senate bills filed by the Honorable Senator, and we have prepared a position paper or comments to be submitted to the Secretariat. Good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you for that, sir. We also appreciate the support because both DOTR and DPWH will be the ones will be very instrumental in implementing this. So may I now call on MMDA who is speaking, Attorney Crisanto Cruz Saruca, sir. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairperson and everybody here present. The Metropolitan Manila Development Authority supports the Senate bills under consideration as the same are fully aligned with its mandates of traffic and transport management and the promotion of health and public safety. The authority is equally an advocate of measures for sustainable alternative modes of transportation and active mobility in the National Capital Region. The MMDA lauds the provision in the subject bills, which requires all users of non-motorized vehicles and electric personal mobility devices to obey traffic laws, rules, and regulations, and shall be subject to existing penalties for violations thereof, in keeping with the principle that for every right, there is a corresponding responsibility. Corollarily, may we propose that said users be required to use personal protective equipment for their personal safety and protection. Finally, Your Honor, the MMDA also looks forward for the establishment of the water ferry system to complement the authority's existing Pasig River passenger ferry, which serves as an alternative mode of transportation for the Metro Manila commuters. Thank you very much.
Nabanggit niya when you mentioned the ferries, no, we'll have a further discussion on this on sustainable transportation. For now, focus lang tayo sa safe pathways due to lack of time only. Okay, may I call on Dr. Beverly Ho? Would you like to say a few words and share your insight with the committee?
Thank you very much. Um, the DOH fully supports the intent of the proposed bills on the promotion of safe roads and active transport for the multitude of benefits that already includes physical activity, mental health, environmental health, and road safety. This is consistent with our health promotion framework strategy, which is hinged on the basic fact that 80% of our population's health is a function of combined socioeconomic status, physical activity, and health behavior of people. And actually, only 20% is accounted for by clinics and hospitals. And so we are really one with you, Senator Pia, in making sure that this is actually organized in a way that promotes health. The DOH, in view of this, intently promotes active transport in all its forms and advocates for its institutionalization so that we may encourage its use, including in terms of policy development and enforcement, infrastructure development, maintenance, and information education. I am very aware of the time. We do have a position paper, Senator, which explicitly outlines our recommendations on standards, on road safety and rights of active transport users, on public access to bicycle units and facilities, on M&E, on capacity development of LGUs, and on the proposed governance, which we currently now have an interagency technical working group on active transport. So perhaps we can just forward these detailed comments to the Secretariat po. Thank you very much, and we are very, very supportive of these initiatives.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Beverly Ho, and it's always nice to see you. Okay, so before we end, no, because I had to abruptly suspend to go to the other hearing, I was the presentation from the mobility office of Taguig had just concluded, and I just wanted to toss a few questions, no, because these are very common. I experience it as a biker, and then I hear about it from other bikers. Common questions are obstructions of dedicated bike lanes, no? So dedicated na and then napaparadahan ng kotse, di ba? And I remember in a hearing I had maybe 2-3 years ago, sabi ko nga, even when I was biking in other countries, that happens, no? So wala naman ka talagang choice kundi liliko ka. Is it a hazard? Yes, it's a hazard. I don't really know how it can be addressed given that in some cases, yun na talaga yung kalsada no? And kung sabihin mong, I don't know, unless ipagbabawal yung parking doon, pero I honestly don't know the answer because in some places wala na talagang ibang paparadahan. So obstruction is one. Connectivity. I remember having a discussion, I think, with my brother, former Mayor Lino, about yung mga Tagig bikers gustong tumawid ng C5, 'di ba? So kailangan, I think I was the one who helped they have set up that discussion with MMDA para kailangan, so within Taguig wala tayong problema kasi it's just one city, pero interconnectivity between cities and crossing national highways, yeah, so those are among the common questions. Very short response, just for the record, and then I'll have to suspend due to my time constraint.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With regards to the issues raised, and also with the issues and concerns raised by Sir Mats earlier, we want to emphasize that cycling problems such as obstructions on our cycling lanes and issues of connectivity are always intercity problems. So we want to emphasize that these concerns should always be addressed by a lot of LGUs, especially those neighboring LGUs. And regarding for the obstruction, as per our studies, there's really two major ways to combat obstructions along our cycling lanes. One would be education, of course, and also a lot of enforcement. So those two things really change the behaviors, not just by our cyclists themselves, but also the motorist or the or our motorist. Um, and also, we want to address and for the record, regarding the issues raised by Sir Mats, we would be coordinating with the neighboring LGUs of Pasig and Rizal regarding the issues of obstructions along our C6 bike lane. Thank you. That will be all.
And then I mentioned this, no, to all the bike advocates, enthusiasts. Um, wala tuloy yung aking train of thought. um, and I genuinely forgot what I was going to say. Thanks to Claire reminding me that I have to stand up in a few minutes. Give me a few seconds to try to recall.
Madam Chairwoman, can I
Ah,
just
yes,
can
go
I just
ahead.
make a comment lang kasi kanina I made if you don't mind, I made a
Yes,
comment
just very
about the
quickly because I have to be out of here before 3.
yes, the requirement about the facilities sa barangay health centers. I made when I mentioned about 9 out of 10, I was referring to the barangay health centers I visited. There's a number of barangay health centers that has equipment and supplies, but karamihan po wala po. So I guess they just have to do an audit of it.
Yes, noted. Kasi
Thank you.
ako naman I recognize that the availability of supplies vary from BHW to BHC, Barangay Health Center to Barangay Health Center. So I don't think all of them are like that, and in fact I'm sure not all, but there would be those that really need. So noted naman natin yan na it's
Thank you, ma'am.
it depends on the particular health center. No, so what I wanted to say to bike enthusiasts from all over the country, is I'd like to see best practices, no? Maybe you can help me because I'm sure you're in touch with others from other parts of the country, not just Iloilo and Taguig, Quezon City. Sino pa yung isang awarded?
Pasig as well.
Pasig, oo. Ano yung mga best practices doon, no? What can we all learn from it? Kasi although pumasa na on third reading in the last Congress yung bill na ito, and I don't necessarily have to put the bill best practices in the bill, but I would love to report it out. So pictures, no, from you, and can you tell your colleagues in your counterparts in the other cities or provinces? Kasi we would really like to be able to share that. What can and I'm a believer of short term, like immediately implementable solutions, and then long term goal setting, yung mga aspirations natin for a active transportation city na yun na nga pinangungunahan talaga ng bicycles, no? So yeah, I have more to share on my own. I'd like to interact, but time constraints, I will have to suspend this hearing. Thank you so much to all who have been physically present. I hope you have a safe trip going back to your offices. And thank you to all those also who attended our hearing. The hearing is suspended. Thank you.